When it comes to understanding people, you need to sometimes understand how they perceive history. To people in the United States, 300 years ago, 200 years ago, seems like a dusty old book in a library that only boring people will read. So yeah, sure, sometimes you celebrate July 4th and you remember something that happened 200 years ago. But for the most part, if you grew up in America, that seems like a fairy tale, something a long time ago that isn't really affecting your life. However, for people in the global south, that is not always the case, because the history of 100, 200 years ago is still affecting their lives every single day. Especially if you are someone from India or China or any other country that was possibly doing better before the 19th and 18th centuries, when the European powers who had advanced from their own technological improvements during the Industrial Revolution and enabled them to overpower these civilizations. Again, to you as an American or European, this might sound like convoluted crap, but to people on the ground in these countries, it actually isn't. Not everybody, but let's take an example. I just read something from a Chinese person who helps Chinese people go abroad to live in other countries, and his article was on Peru. Recently, China built a port in Peru that people in America are concerned about because it will be competing with a port in California. However, to the Chinese writer, this port did not just mean something in the context of US-China relations, nor in the context of China seeking resources to help its own citizens. To him, he looked back at the history of what Peru has meant to the Chinese people. 200 years ago, 150 years ago, when the Qing dynasty was falling apart due to its own incompetence and because of countries like my own home country of the United Kingdom, many Chinese left South China because of the turmoil there to find work in other countries. Back 100 years ago, this actually entered the English language with the word coolie, C-O-O-L-I-E. In Chinese, the word is coolie, which literally means bitter and power, meaning bitter. Working is very bitter. It feels very bitter to have to work to survive. These people made it to Singapore, and that's why Singapore today has a lot of Chinese there. But they also went to Peru, and back then Peru was still under the power of a lot of Europeans. The author talks about how a lot of Chinese had to work underneath a British boss and listen to his orders, and if they didn't follow it, they would have grave consequences. But eventually, these Chinese worked hard to become quite influential in Peruvian society, even making it into the government and becoming inventors. So the idea of this port being built is not just a current issue in current geopolitical events. To some Chinese, it is an illustration of how far Chinese people have come over the past 150 years. And so I'm not saying everybody thinks like this, but when I talk with some Chinese, they will view me in the context of their own history because of the color of my skin. And we need to remember this, because in the United States, our history is different, and we've evolved over the past 250 years to at least say that we don't care about skin. Sure, and sometimes that is actually not how things play out, but it has become a general belief to not judge people off the color of their skin. But the past is still influencing the future, and we need to pay attention to that, because not everybody in this world has forgotten the past. And why should they? Because their country is not doing as well as it was doing 300 years ago, at least in comparison to the rest of the world. So yeah, bye-bye.